The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining today's virtual Lunch and Learn on Sage Intacct. My name is Allie Phillips, and I am in Sales and Marketing here at the TAM Group, and I'll be your host. Presenting today, we have Brian Lealy, and he is one of our top consultants here at the TM Group. A couple of things to go over before we get started. If you have any questions, please type them out in the questions or chat boxes on the right-hand side of your screen. And this is also being recorded and will be sent to you within the next few days. So if you have any additional questions once the webinar is over, please feel free to shoot me an email when that arises. And with that being said, I will hand things over to you, Brian.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much. And thank you, Allie, and thank you everyone for attending our webinar today. Our webinar is on slicing and dicing your data with Sage Intacct. So I hope we can present some things to you that get you guys really thinking about how to get the most information out of your software. We're going to talk about some things that maybe you hadn't thought about in the past. So without further ado, I'm going to jump through a few things here on our PowerPoint, just kind of go through the agenda for today, so some housekeeping things here. Do some brief introductions, as Allie mentioned. And then we're going to talk about differentiation through dimensions. How does Sage Intacct differentiate itself from other applications using dimensions? And then we're going to dive into the product and show you how to slice and dice your data using those dimensions. And then we'll just kind of summarize things and talk about some further resources that we can use to, if you guys have any further questions and moving forward from that point. So without further ado, as Allie mentioned, she kind of introduced herself already, and I'll just kind of introduce myself real briefly here. I've been in consulting since 1999. I've worked on several different ERP packages, including the Microsoft suite. Now we're focusing on a lot of our cloud packages, Sage Intacct being the one, obviously, that we're talking about today. So very exciting stuff, getting into the cloud and just working with an application that gives you so much flexibility and diversity in a product. So I've worked with many different organizations, from project type organizations, nonprofit, distribution. So there's just a lot of different organizations that are able to really take advantage of what Sage Intacct has to offer. So let's start off by talking about what are dimensions. So this is really the foundation of what gives us our reporting within Sage Intacct. So think a dimension is simply a classification system that you can use to organize, sort, and report on your company information in meaningful ways. So start by thinking of a dimension as kind of a tag type with a set of values which you can associate with a transaction and general ledger entries. In every transaction you enter, you have the option to be tagged with multiple dimension values to uniquely identify and report on that transaction. And then next, think of a dimension as having a relationship that enables you to preset and populate dimension values in a transaction based on other dimension values. So for example, if you're always using the same location with a specific customer, you can create a relationship between that customer and that location dimension to set the location value to auto-populate every time you create a transaction against that customer. And that gives you consistency, accuracy, and efficiency when you're doing your data entry. And then finally, think of the end game. The whole purpose of having dimensions is so you can use these dimensions to create financial reports around the specific business activities and allow you to track key metrics which are central to your business. So just think of some things, or just some examples to track or report on using dimensions. If we wanted to track our most profitable items or customers, or the ROI of a project or a department, and whether a new product or product line is successful. So those give us some options to use dimensions to report on those types of parameters. And then you have the ability to create custom dimensions. And that basically ensures that you're reporting on what's most important to your business. So you can create custom dimensions and identify key metrics within your business. For example, if you're a nonprofit and you want to track your highest donors, you can use a dimension for that. an item or promotion with the best ROI, or which facility type is the most successful in our organization. So dimensions really drive the visibility into the parts of the business that matter most to you. And Sage Intacct has out-of-the-box standard dimensions. So I'll just kind of list them out. They've got location, department, class, customer, item, project, vendor, employee, warehouse, and contract. Now, some of those dimensions can be repurposed for other information that might be important to you. Say, for example, you want to change class to line of business, as an example. You have the ability to repurpose some of those out-of-the-box dimensions to suit the needs that you have in your organization. And that terminology will flow through the entire system by repurposing those dimensions. So very cool. And again, great flexibility within the system for that process. All right, so G2 Crowd, so I'm showing a slide here, these are many different organization types that are able to take advantage of Sage Intacct's dimension features and gives them the ability to report and slice and dice their data. And you can see the broad spectrum of different organizations. We've got software companies, service organizations, consumer organizations, nonprofit, hospitality, and healthcare. So G2 Crowd is a peer-to-peer organization that basically goes out and they inquire users and ask them about their their satisfaction level with what they're using as far as a software package goes. And Sage Intacct has rated the highest satisfaction in any accounting system. And this was in 2014. They've since acquired that same high level of performance as well in G2 Crowd. So that speaks very highly of what Sage Intacct has done with their application. And not only that, they also are the only cloud-based ERP system that's endorsed by the AICPA. So for those of you who are already using Sage Intacct, you already know this stuff, but these are great things that we can really be proud of as users and as implementers of this type of system. So very cool stuff. All right, so let's take a look at slicing and dicing our information. So now we're going to dive into the actual product and get things started here. Before we get too far along, depending on how much coffee I've had this morning, we may be quite less than an hour, but we'll do what we get. You know, I'm going to go through all the information that we have. So we may not take the entire hour, but I just want to present a lot of information to you guys. And hopefully, again, this will drive some thought behind what you're currently doing, maybe shed some light on some things that you might be able to pick up and implement into your organization as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So let me jump over to our product. So here we are. So up front, I'm going to just kind of talk about the organization that I have. So this is a company, it's called Flying Higher Education, and they are an aviation college, and they offer two different degree programs and courses that are related to that particular, or those degrees. And currently I'm logged in, so I'm going to just kind of give you an overview of Sage Intacct because this may be the first time some of you are seeing Sage Intacct. So before I jump into the details and start getting carried away with the reporting, let me give you some of the lay of the land here. So currently I'm logged in as Carla Grace, and she's our executive power user. So Carla's pretty much got full access to the entire system. And this is a multi-organization company, and she has access to all of those different entities within this organization. Now, and that's based on her role and her permission and access rights. We can limit those access rights for a specific person and give them only access to one entity, and we can even drive that down as far as the department level. So I may have a departmental employee, and I only want them to see information that's relevant to their department. Through my roles in security and access rights, I can actually limit down to the department level, which is pretty cool. So you have the flexibility of limiting the visibility or opening up the visibility to whatever you would like within the system. So again, Carla is a power user. She has full access to the entire system and full visibility to all the different entities within this organization. So out of the box, Sage Intacct does a fantastic job giving users visibility to information immediately upon logging in. So through the use of dashboards, users have visibility to the information that's pertinent to their role and give them the ability to analyze information and work efficiently. So let's take a look at some of the components of the dashboard. First, let's take a look at a performance card. As you can see, performance cards sit at the top of the dashboard and they report a single value or KPI. The performance card indicates a change in the key performance indicator from one time frame to another. For example, how are my expenses trending from one month to another? And they also include a visual indicator, which could be a thumbs up, a arrow, or a smiley face. And that indicator just gives us an at-a-glance look of how we're trending with that particular key performance indicator. Very cool stuff. And then another powerful element that can be added to the dashboard is a report. You can show any memorized or financial reports on the dashboard. So anytime you create a financial report or memorize an existing out-of-the-box report, those reports can be displayed on the dashboard. And you can also drill into these reports, giving you the ability to get all the way back to the source transactions that make up the data. That's very important. And then thirdly, let's take a look at some graphs. It wouldn't be a dashboard if we didn't have pie charts and line charts and bar graphs and all these visual indicators that really make a dashboard powerful, right? Graphs help you visualize trends in your business, and they really tell the story that goes beyond just looking at numbers on a report. And then finally, our dashboard, we have the ability to filter the dashboard based on our dimensions. So the dimensions that we have included in our dashboard, we have the ability to filter the entire dashboard on those different dimensions. So without further ado, let's kind of start drilling into some of this information and getting into the topic of our webinar today, which is slicing and dicing the information. So I'm going to start, and we're going to kind of work through, just like we talked about in the dashboard, we're going to start with drilling into some performance cards. We're going to dive into some reporting and then show you how we can manage and slice this information up. So let's take this operating expenses performance card as an example. So right now we can see that we've got this red arrow, which is kind of causing us a little bit of concern. Anytime it's red, that's maybe not so good. So why are we trending up so high? Now keep in mind, we are working in an education environment, and one of the things that we're doing here, and which I really like about the dashboard views within Sage, is that you can set the as of date. So I'm looking at my data as of a point in time, and that point in time is 3/31/2018. And that's just because that's where my data is. So, but if I wanted to back this up to February and look at months prior to that, I have the ability to do that. So just as an example, let's take a look at our operating expenses. So I'm going to drill into this performance card right now and find out why are we so, why are our expenses up so high from what they were last month. So we're looking at our operating expenses, which is an account group that maintains or is including several of our expense accounts. So this account group for my operating expenses is really presenting this information to me. So I can look at March 31st, we're trending at $58,000 for our expenses. Well, back in February, at the end of the month, February, we only had $5,000 in expenses. Well, we're thinking about what we do. Well, yes, we're a college and our term just started. So the only expense we had in February was our rent. And now we're incurring some of these contract labor costs, office expenses, and things like that. So this makes sense to us. But one thing that we do notice is that our rent expense went up $4,000. So I may want to drill into this and find out what's really going on here. So I can simply just drill into that number And now I'm getting a view of the rent expense account, and I can see my bill here for that $4,000. And I'm going to drill into that, and that bill is broken up. That's how I know this is the $4,000 bill. I'm going to drill into this and take a look at what's underlying this particular bill. And when we enter this information, so I'm in the bill right now, and I'm looking at the details of that bill. So here's my $4,000. And what we can see here is this bill is broken down by dimension. So here's where we really get the power of using dimensions and the ability to report on them. So you can see that that $4,000 was broken down to a single location. We've assigned it to the admissions department, and we've got a fund that we're tracking against. So there are certain funds that we are using to pay for these programs. And so we're going to charge it against that particular fund, which is degree programs. And then I've got a degree, so I'm breaking it out by degree, by aviation management. So 2 different degrees are taking up some of this cost, and then I'm allocating that to each one of the different courses that apply to those degrees. So that is how, when we're doing our data entry, we're able to expand and tag these transactions with the dimensions, which now gives me the ability to start reporting on that. So if I wanted to look at course information, I know that whatever report that I pull up, since I've tagged this transaction with a particular course or degree program, I can now report on that. Very cool stuff. And I can easily set up an allocation to set up and create this type of tagging within this transaction. So again, that creates accuracy within our data entry as well as speed, because to break this out manually would take a little bit of effort, but I could actually set up a transaction that says, all right, break this out by location, department, fund, degree program, and course. So here we are. I've got that breakdown of this bill. So the 4,000 has been attached to all these different dimensions. So from my dashboard, I was able to drill in and answer the question, why is my rent up further? And we brought in a new building because our class size expanded, so we had to rent a new building, and that's why our rent's higher this year. But from my performance card, I was able to drill into that information and really get down to the answer. And again, that's based on the dimension values that we have, the account groups that we've created in the system that allow me to create these performance cards. Very cool stuff. And let's take a look at another performance card. This is my student count. So not only are we demonstrating or displaying financial activities on our dashboard, we're also tracking statistical information. So student count is really a statistical value that we're tracking. So every time a student signs up for a course or I bring on a new student, my student count goes up and I can track that. So from month to month, let's just take a look at, I'll move my period here to the end of February, so 02/28/18, and I'm going to repaint my dashboard based on that time frame, and we'll see these numbers change. And again, this is the ability to slice and dice this data through the as of date and the dimensions that I have here. I can actually see what's going on. And you can see, well, in February, we weren't open, we didn't do the enrollment for students yet, so we have no new students as of February. And here's that rent expense that we saw in our prior example. So I can see as I'm trending through this, and I'll go ahead and put this back to 3/31/2018 and repaint that dashboard. And you can see, so our student count goes up. And I have the ability then to track, are we doing better? How is our student count from the prior month? So we're up 105 students from the prior month. Now let's slice this a little differently. Maybe I want to understand, well, what classes or what degree programs make up those counts? So let's take a look at one of my degree programs. So I'm going to look at aviation flight science. So let's go ahead and select that degree program in my dashboard. And now when I apply that filter, my entire dashboard is now focusing only on transactions and activities that are related to that degree program. So similar to what we saw when we looked at that rent bill, when we had those line items tagged with this degree program, now I'm seeing that only, all of my dashboard is now painted with that particular degree program in mind. So I can see that I've got 61 students that are actively participating in the aviation flight science degree program. We've incurred $10,000 worth of expenses this month. We've got $73,000 worth of revenue. So again, using those filters in my dashboard is giving me the ability to answer questions that, help me really see how our business is trending and giving me visibility to the information that's in the system without having to run a bunch of reports to get the same information. And I think that's really key, because sometimes people get so caught up on, well, I can get to that information. Yes, but it may take you 3 steps, or you might have to run 2 different reports to see that same information. I can just slice and dice my data through the dashboard, selecting the proper filters and narrowing that data down. Gives us a lot of flexibility, and again, we can report on this stuff too, but if it's just to get the answer and understand how we're trending, I've got this stuff at my fingertips. And this really plays well when you're in a board meeting. You can pull up this dashboard and start slicing and dicing the information right in front of your audience and give them the visibility to what's going on in the organization without having to do a bunch of reports and handouts. You can actually do your presentation with a dashboard, and I think that's pretty cool. All right, so let's go ahead and move this back to our full all degrees, and we'll dive into a report. So from the dashboard, I'm going to take a look at one of our reports. So we've got a course, I'll wait for this to regenerate here a minute. I've got a course profit and loss report sitting here on the dashboard, which is pretty cool. So it's actually by degree. So I'll go ahead and pop this up. So if I want to preview the report, you can see that if it was a really big report, I might have to scroll right and left, which I do here anyway. But I can pop this open just by hitting the view all. So that's going to present this report to me. So I'm going to walk you through kind of the layout of this report, just so you can get a sense for what we're looking at here. So right here, we're looking at each degree program. So I've got aviation flight services. This is the degree program. I've got my actual incurred expenses and revenue, and I've got my course budget, and then I've got just a percentage variance column. So that's by degree program. So I've got my other degree program here showing the same thing, actual, course budget, and variance. And then it gives me a total for all degree programs. So this is really cool information to have, but in looking at this, maybe I want to find out a little bit more. I want to understand what courses we're really looking at, or what courses are these students signed up for. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to close this out a minute. Now from my dashboard, I'm going to take a look at this report, and I want to drill into it. So I'm going to edit it and do a couple little things. I'm going to switch the data around and see what we can come up with here. So what I'm really interested in is I want to know what courses on this report those students are signing up for, and where is the revenue coming from. So I'm going to go ahead and change one of the rows on my report. I'm going to summarize the data and expand it by the course. So I just make that quick little change, and let's see. All right, so I'm going to do that. So now I'm going to preview this report, and we'll see what we get now. So again, I'm not, whoops, what did I do there? That is not what I wanted to see. Oh, I got to put the right date in. Hold on. 03/31/18. That will help. Okay, so let's preview this report. So from here, now you can see that report is giving me a lot more information, right? So not only am I looking at the degree program, but I'm able to see the revenue breakdown by courses. So I've got aerodynamics and performance. I've got 34,000 there. Aviation law. So those 2 courses are related to this degree program. And then I've got my intro to airframe and systems. So based on just making that quick little change on my report, I'm able to kind of do like a pivot table view. I've got my degree program up here. I've got my courses down here. Let's say I want to look at my operating expenses in a little bit different fashion. Maybe I want to just see what department those operating expenses are related to. So I can change this and I'll summarize this and expand this by department, and let's take a look at that. So now I'm kind of slicing and dicing that data without having to recreate a new report. Okay, so I can see that all of my costs are associated with the admissions department, and that's good because that's really where they should be. Now, if I saw that there was a couple different categories or a couple different departments showing cost for this particular program, I may be concerned and we may need to reclassify some entries. But think about what I'm showing here. I've broken down my expenses by department. I'm showing my revenue by course. I'm giving us a degree program view. So this is really powerful stuff. And I have not created new reports to do this. I've taken an existing, a very basic report, and I've started changing it to show different data. Now I can go back and show my student count. I could break that out by class so I could see exactly which classes have as many students. So you can start to see how powerful this reporting tool alongside the dimensions really is. It's very powerful. And another cool thing that we can do with these reports is within the aviation, if I want to go here, let me change, I'm going to stop a second. I get so excited I sometimes trip over myself trying to get this stuff done. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back to detail. We'll just go with that on the expenses. But I'm going to jump over to the columns. Remember how I was expanding that column, or you remember how simple that view looked. I've got my course budgets here, and we're expanding this by degree programs. Now I could do the same thing and expand that by course. So not only within the degree program, I could expand that by course as well and show you, show that information here. So rather than expanding by degrees, I'm going to go ahead and expand this by course, and we'll go ahead and show you that. And I'll change all of them to course, and we'll just, that way it'll be consistent. But again, I'm doing this just off of a base report that we've created, and I'm just showing different ways to look at the data. So now you can see by course, and I could change this over by to department as well, or whatever. But so I'm looking at an income statement by course to show what the revenue is, what the cost is, what the student count. Now it's expanding out by course. That is very powerful to be able to really slice and dice these reports, and they're very easy to create. Basically, I just put a little bit of information in, and no matter how many courses I have, the report will continue on and expand that information out for me. So I've got the ability to really add a course, and that's the beauty of dimensions. If I were to add a new department or add a new course, I don't have to go back and reformat my financial reports, because once I start tagging transactions with that new course information, the system knows it will expand by any available course that has transactions in the time period for what we're reporting, and it will automatically start displaying information for that course. So think about this real briefly. If you, let's say your organization was going to add a new department, and they said, all right, we want to start tracking costs immediately against this new department called social networking. So if you were to look at your own software, or if you're not using Sage Intacct, how hard is it to add a new department and start tracking costs to that? In some organizations or some applications, if they're using a sub-account structure, they might have to go through and, oh, we got to add sub-account for this. And, it's a pretty can be a pretty big task, and then you might have to include that in your reporting. So now you're going through and updating all your reporting as well. Well, in Sage Intacct, all you have to do is basically go in and add the new department to the department dimension, and now you're able to start transacting against that, booking transactions, and reporting against that particular department. So very powerful stuff. And I'm going to jump back to, I'm going to cancel out of here a minute and show. So we're back to our report. So keep in mind, I took that report from my dashboard, made a couple slight modifications to it, and was able to really present a lot of data within that same report without really doing too much. And I could easily change or save those changes and make it a new report. So now I've got my by degree program showing departmental expenses and things like that. So as easily as I can change it, I could actually save that and save it as its own report as well. So you have the ability to do that. But keep in mind, I've done all this information, or I've done all these changes directly from my dashboard. And that's powerful when you're talking about just trying to answer the questions. And if I'm in a meeting, I want to analyze my data, you have the ability right at your fingertips to drill into some of these reports, change them around so that you're really slicing and dicing through that data to get at the answers that you're really looking for. So very powerful stuff. Again, I get excited about this because I used to be in accounting, and man, if we had tools like this, I may still be an accountant today. Who knows? But anyway, all right, so let's keep moving on. So not only do we have the ability to report on multiple dimensions within the system, Sage Intacct also has the ability to use a multi-book environment as well. So along with supporting the use of GAAP and tax books for tracking specialized entries that are not normal entries within your system, you also have the ability to create an external book, or a book that you can track external entries that maybe you don't want reported in your operating books, but we want to use that book to track against. So Sage Intacct gives you the ability to create user-defined books, which are ideal for tracking information that's specialized or report and specialized on accounting entries, such as industry-specific accounting differences that might reflect certain reports, tax code differences for geographical areas, benchmarking that you want to compare yourself against. So in here, I've created a new book. So this being an aviation college, we have some things that we have to consider for cost, and they don't necessarily want to track these on a budget ledger. So they want to actually create a separate book to maintain, excuse me, they want to maintain some maintenance that has to happen on their aircraft. So I'm going to pop open this report. This is my multi-book expense report. And I want to just show you how this features, or how this functions within the system. This is pretty powerful stuff too. So in this report, you can see I've got my expenses. So I've got my operational expenses laid out here. So here's my actual. This is coming directly out of my ledger. But then I'm comparing this against my budget. So we do have a expense budget, and I've got that set up. So I'm comparing my actuals against my budget. But then I've got my planning book. So this information is actually maintained in a completely separate book from what my financials are doing, and it's not in my budget information. So this gives me the ability to kind of forecast out expenditures that I know are going to happen, but I don't really want to build them into the budget because they may be a little bit flexible. And I want to just kind of keep those out of our normal operating budget and keep this information separate. So what I've got going here, I've got the actual, I've got my budget, and here is my maintenance book. So we know that in July and November, so I've expanded this book. So these are just giving me my year to date right here. But this is going through the end of the year and expanding by month. So I can see what month these activities or these expenses, we are potentially going to incur them. So we want to just be able to plan for that information and plan for those expenses. So I created a report that shows me when those are coming up in our timeline throughout the year. So as we're going through the year, we know that as we come up to July, we are potentially going to be incurring a pretty significant expense here. And again, that is done through creating a new book in the report. And I want to just show you how that looks. So if I go and edit this report, I'm able to see this book, or actually add this book into my report through the column here. So I'm going to drive into the column, and you'll see here is my planning book. So if I look here, I'm going to open up this column for you. So it's reporting actual, but then when I come down here, I can look and see that the book that I'm using for this particular column is my planning book. And we would make those entries just like a journal entry that you're going to make in your system to track the information. I just booked an entry into my planning book that says, here's some expenses that we're going to incur, in which periods they're going to incur, or we're going to incur them. And then I've posted those, and now I'm able to report on them. And you can see here I'm expanding that book only. So I'm not expanding these actuals in my budget. I'm expanding the book for my planning so that I can kind of forecast out and see what's going to be happening as we get going through the end of the year. So this really gives me a great visibility of our coming expenses that, again, maybe we don't want to maintain in our budget. We want to maintain these kind of outside of our normal budget and operating expenses. So we created a new book for that, and I'm able to put those books into the same report together, and I can actually do some calculations off of these as well, showing differences and things like that. So very powerful tools. So again, with the dimensions, the multi-book functionality, you have a great source to report and really slice and dice this data and get back to what's really important. And what that is, creating effective reports easily without having to go through too many steps to do this stuff. And I think that's what's so powerful. A lot of times as accountants, we get so used to using Excel, we're just, by default, we dump things out to Excel and start playing around with it in there, and we create pivot tables and stuff. But within the report writer and Sage Intacct, you have the ability to create those types of reports, and you have the ability to really slice and dice that data, which is, for me, again, is very exciting, and I just love using this report writer. It's very cool. So with that being said, that is, again, I think I had one more cup of coffee than I probably should have, but I tend to speed up things and go pretty fast. So anyway, that's really what I wanted to show us today and get through that information. Just keep in mind, and here's one thing that we typically find out when we get done with implementations, we always like to circle back and find out how people are using the software and how's it going for them. And a lot of times what we find is they get so involved in their day-to-day work, they forget about the ability to create some really cool dashboards and things like that. So what we like to do is circle back and go, hey, have you, been using the dashboards? And we'll help set those dashboards up and get some of these cool reports out there so they can take advantage of these things, because I know it's real easy to get so involved in the day-to-day activities that you forget sometimes about some of these tools that can really make your day more efficient. Because really the goal of a dashboard is to not only present information for you, but it can be kind of your starting point for your daily activities as well. And I think that's one important feature that people sometimes forget about within the dashboard. So let's see, I think that is about what I had for us today. I want to touch base on a couple other real quick things for those that or for those that know. Next week on February 22nd, the new release, the 2019 release 1, is coming out. So take advantage of that information. I'm going to jump to our home screen here. I think it shows it here. Yep. So coming soon, so the release, and there is if you look at the release dates, they're coming out, check out the release calendar. So that shows what dates the new releases are coming out. So this will show you that on February 22nd. So I'll go ahead and jump into that. Here is the release schedule for 2019. So next week, we have 2019 release 1 and some of those highlights. So just jump in here and take a look at some of the highlights that are coming up. The biggest thing that I know a lot of our customers are asking about and anxious to see is the new bank reconciliation process, which allows you to connect to over 10,000 banks in the world, kind of giving you that auto drop down or auto information that's going to bring in the transactions automatically for your reconciliation. So that's very powerful. So check out these release notes as well. And again, that's coming out next week. So some of this stuff is going to be hot off the press next week, and you'll be able to start taking advantage of that too. And another thing that I didn't mention is, talking about report writing, slicing, and dicing data. For those of you who have been able to take advantage of the new interactive report writer, that is out and available. I have it here. So interactive custom reports, that gives you some additional abilities that we had our hands tied a little bit on some of the requirements or the requests that we had in our custom report writer. Well, the interactive custom report writer really solves a lot of those problems. And so look into that too. I know there's some webinars out there on that product as well. So take a look at that too. And again, that's just going to be another tool that gives you the ability to drill into the data and really get the information out of the system that you need. So with all of that said, Allie, I think we are ready to wrap things up. So I will go ahead and turn it back over to you. Do we have any questions, Allie, in the chat window?
All right, thank you, Brian. We do not have any questions currently. We could wait a second to see if any pop up. I did want to mention really quick that we have a webinar scheduled for next Wednesday at the same time for a Dynamics 365 Business Central overview. Is there anything else you wanted to say while people could be writing out questions?
Yeah, just like I mentioned, our number one thing is getting in there and trying it. Sometimes I get a lot of questions regarding, how do I create this report? And honestly, getting in there and just playing around with it sometimes can answer those questions. But obviously, we're here to help people, and we want to, make the most out of their experience with the package. So at any time, we're available. Our contact information is, I think Allie's sending it out to everybody, or it's on our website too. Please feel free to give us a shout or email us and let us know if you have any questions. We'd love to help you. We've created several different types of reports and had a lot of fun doing it. So anybody that has questions or about any aspect of the application, we'd love to help.
Yeah, and it looks like we don't have any questions currently. So like Brian said, if you guys have any questions in the future, we would love to help you. But thank you, Brian, again for doing this. And
absolutely, thank you.
A great rest of your week.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.